The last thing I remember clearly before the hospital was trying to stand up from my couch and realizing my legs weren't working properly. My vision had gone blurry hours earlier. I'd been vomiting for most of the afternoon. My mouth was so dry I couldn't swallow. I was 23 years old, living in a basement apartment and working as a junior software developer. I'd been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes 2 years earlier. I took insulin 4 times a day, tested my blood sugars 6 times a day, and had gotten used to the routine of keeping myself alive. Until my brother needed money. Brandon was 26, 3 years older, and had been my mother's favorite since we were children. When he showed up at my apartment asking to borrow $300, I said no. I didn't have it. I was barely making rent on my entry-level salary, and my insulin alone cost me $400 a month, even with insurance. He left angry. I didn't think much of it. Brandon was always angry about something. 2 days later, I opened my refrigerator to get my insulin and found the space empty. Both bottles were gone. My backup supply, gone. Everything. I called him immediately. He didn't answer. I called 6 more times. Nothing. Then I called my mother. Brandon was just here. He said you gave him some medication to sell because you didn't need it anymore. What medication? I don't know. Some kind of injection thing. He said you were faking your diabetes for attention anyway and didn't really need it. My hands were shaking. Mom, I have type 1 diabetes. I need insulin to live. Brandon stole my insulin. I need you to tell me where he is right now. Brandon wouldn't steal from you. You're obviously confused. Maybe you misplaced it. I didn't misplace it. It was in my refrigerator. Now it's gone. He told you he took it. He said you gave it to him because you were faking the diabetes. I believe him. You always were dramatic about health things. I hung up and called my insurance company. They wouldn't approve an early refill. I just picked up my prescription 4 days ago. The system showed I should have a month's supply. Come back in 26 days. I called the pharmacy. Could I buy insulin without insurance? Yes. $480 for 1 bottle. I had $60 in my checking account. I tried to ration the insulin I had in my pump, stretching it as far as I could. By the 3rd day, I was in trouble. By the 4th day, I couldn't think straight. A neighbor found me unconscious and called 911. I woke up in the ICU with an IV in my arm, another in my hand, and monitors beeping steadily beside me. Diabetic ketoacidosis, the doctor explained patiently, showing me numbers on a chart. My blood sugar had been over 600 when the paramedics found me. Normal was between 70 and 120. My body had started breaking down fat for energy because it couldn't access glucose without insulin, poisoning my blood with ketones in the process. My blood pH had dropped dangerously low. My kidneys were stressed. I was severely dehydrated. Another few hours and I would have slipped into a coma. Another day, and I might not have woken up at all. The doctor's voice was matter of fact, but I saw the concern in his eyes. This was serious. This was the kind of thing that killed people. The hospital bill was $8,000. Even with insurance, I owed $2,200 I didn't have. The hospital social worker came to talk to me about medication access and insurance problems, asking careful questions about whether I had somewhere safe to live and whether I had support at home. A police officer came to ask if I wanted to file a report about the stolen medication. My mother came and stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, telling the officer I was making up stories about Brandon because I was jealous of his success, and always had been. Your daughter nearly died from lack of insulin, the officer said. She's always been dramatic, my mother replied. I didn't file charges. I was exhausted, traumatized, and I knew Brandon would claim I'd given him permission. It would be my word against his, and my mother would support him. The officer gave me his card and told me to call if I changed my mind. Brandon never apologized. My mother never acknowledged that I'd been hospitalized because of something Brandon did. She told family members I'd had a health scare because I wasn't managing my diabetes properly. I stopped speaking to both of them. 6 months later, I moved to a different city, got a better job, and built a life where I didn't have to think about my brother selling my insulin on the street for drug money, or my mother choosing to believe I'd fake a disease that required 4 injections a day. Over the next 8 years, I worked my way up in tech. I became a senior developer, then a team lead, then an engineering manager. My salary went from $40,000 to $200,000. I bought a house. I had good insurance through my company. I could afford my insulin without counting pennies. I heard about Brandon through occasional family updates. He'd gone to rehab twice. He'd lost several jobs. He was living with our mother, who was also struggling financially after being laid off from her administrative position. 3 years ago, I learned through a cousin that Brandon had lost his job and his insurance. Our mother had minimal coverage through a healthcare marketplace plan, but Brandon had nothing. He was rationing his blood pressure medication because he couldn't afford it, my cousin said. Mom was worried about him. I did something I'm still not entirely sure I understand. I set up an insurance policy for both of them, a good one, through a private insurance broker I found online. It cost me $1,400 a month. I paid it anonymously through a corporate entity I'd created for freelance consulting work. The broker contacted them and explained it was a special assistance program for low-income individuals, carefully structured so my name never appeared anywhere in the paperwork. Neither of them knew it was me. I told myself I was doing it because I didn't want my mother to die from lack of health care, regardless of what she'd done. Because Brandon, despite everything, was still technically my brother, and I didn't want him dying from a preventable condition because he couldn't afford medication. I told myself I was being the bigger person, that I was being compassionate where they had been cruel. But I think the real reason was that I didn't want them to have any excuse. I didn't want to hear that Brandon couldn't hold a job because he couldn't afford his blood pressure medication. I didn't want my mother claiming she couldn't afford her cholesterol medication or her arthritis treatments. I wanted to remove every possible obstacle and see if they'd take responsibility for their own lives, to see if they'd grow, change, or become better people once the external barriers were gone. They didn't. Brandon continued cycling through jobs and blaming everyone but himself. My mother continued enabling him, telling family members he was just having bad luck, that employers were unfair, that the world was against him. I kept paying the insurance. $1,400 a month, $16,800 a year, $50,400 over 3 years. Last week, my mother called me. We hadn't spoken in 2 years. I almost didn't answer. I thought you should know, she said, her voice strained. Brandon was diagnosed with diabetes, type 1. His doctor said it's serious. He needs insulin 4 times a day. I sat very still, the phone against my ear, processing what she just said. Did you hear me? She asked. I heard you. He's scared. He doesn't understand the disease yet. I thought maybe you could talk to him about managing it since you have it too. Since I have the disease he told you I was faking, I said quietly. She was silent for a moment. That was years ago. He was in a bad place. He doesn't remember saying that. He sold my insulin. I was hospitalized. You told the police I was making it up. We don't need to rehash old conflicts. Your brother needs support right now. He needs family. Tell him to be very careful with his insulin supply, I said. Tell him to keep it somewhere safe. Tell him that running out of insulin is a medical emergency. Tell him that someone stealing your insulin can kill you. I hung up. I sat in my home office for an hour, thinking about cosmic justice and karma and whether I believed in either. Then I called my insurance broker. I need to cancel the policy I've been paying for the Morrison family, I said. The assistance program, are you sure? That's been active for 3 years. I'm sure. Cancel it effective at the end of this billing cycle. They have 30 days to find alternative coverage. Understood. I'll process the cancellation today. I called my accountant next. I need you to prepare a summary of the insurance payments I've been making for the past 3 years, monthly breakdown, total amount, everything. For tax purposes. For documentation purposes. The cancellation notice went out the next day. My mother called me from a number I didn't recognize. The insurance company says our coverage is ending. They said the program is being discontinued. Do you know anything about this? Yes, I said. Can you help us? Brandon just got diagnosed. He needs this insurance. The insulin alone costs $500 a month without coverage. I know exactly how much it costs, I said. Then you understand. He can't afford it. I can't afford it. We need help. Mom, I have a question. Do you remember when Brandon stole my insulin? We're not doing this. We're not bringing up the past when your brother is in crisis. Do you remember telling the police I was making it up? That I was faking my diabetes? That was 8 years ago. Brandon was sick. He's better now. He's not better. He's just had his consequences delayed, and the insurance you've been using for 3 years, the program that covered both of you. That was me. I've been paying $1,400 a month for 3 years, $50,000 keeping you both insured. The silence on the other end was complete. The coverage you have now, the coverage Brandon needs for his insulin, I paid for that. The person you told was faking diabetes has been keeping your diabetic son insured. And now I'm done. You can't do this. He'll die without insulin. Then he'll understand what he did to me. He can figure out what I figured out. Get assistance programs. Buy insulin from Canada. Use GoodRx coupons. Work extra hours to afford it. Do what the rest of us do when we don't have someone secretly paying our insurance. This is cruel. No. Cruel was selling my insulin and telling our mother I was faking a disease. Cruel was watching me get hospitalized and never apologizing. Cruel was 8 years of you believing I would fake something that requires 4 injections a day, finger pricks, and constant vigilance just to stay alive. I'm not being cruel. I'm just no longer protecting Brandon from the consequences of having the disease he claimed I faked. Please, he's your brother. He stopped being my brother when he stole medication he knew I needed to live. You stopped being my mother when you believed him over medical evidence. I spent 3 years paying for your insurance, hoping maybe you changed. You haven't. You only called me when you needed something. If he can't afford insulin, he'll get sick. Yes. That's what happens when you can't afford insulin. I know that better than anyone. I hung up and blocked the number. Brandon tried to reach me through Facebook, Instagram, and email. Each message was a variation on the same theme. He was sorry, he didn't understand back then. He was different now, he needed help. Couldn't I see this was an emergency? I didn't respond. My mother sent a letter to my house, somehow getting my address from a relative. It was 6 pages of explanations. Why I needed to reinstate the insurance, why Brandon deserved help, why I was being unreasonable and vindictive. I sent back a single page. A summary of the insurance payments I'd made over 3 years, totaling $50,400. At the bottom, I wrote, "You're welcome." The family gossip reached me through cousins and distant relatives. Brandon was struggling to afford his insulin. He'd already been to the emergency room once with high blood sugar because he was rationing it. My mother had started a GoFundMe to help with his medical costs. It had raised $300. Some family members thought I was being too harsh. Others, after hearing the full story of what Brandon had done, thought he was getting exactly what he deserved. I felt neither satisfaction nor guilt, just a strange sense of closure. Brandon was learning what I'd learned 8 years ago, that insulin is expensive, that rationing it is dangerous, that the American healthcare system is cruel to diabetics, that every day is a calculation of costs and risks. He was learning what it felt like to need something to survive and not be sure he could afford it. He was learning what he put me through. And my mother was watching him learn it, finally understanding that the disease she claimed I was faking was very, very real. I'd spent 3 years and $50,000 taking care of people who had endangered my life and never apologized. I'd done it hoping they'd somehow realize their mistakes, somehow become better people, somehow acknowledge what they'd done. They hadn't. They'd only realize I existed when they needed something from me. So I let them face the same reality I'd faced at 23. Alone, running out of insulin, with family who didn't believe me and a system that didn't care. The difference was, I'd survived it and built a life anyway. They had the advantage of knowing it was real, knowing it was serious, knowing what to do. Whether they survived it was no longer my responsibility. Some people say blood is thicker than water, but insulin is thicker than both, and they taught me that lesson very clearly 8 years ago. I'd just taken 8 years to return the favor.